I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back, y'all, to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And today... I was going to say, go ahead, Bill. You are our guest here. Say whatever you want.
I'm Bill Cooper. I'm out of here. Bye now.
Okay. Just speaks into the microphone. Bill Cooper is here. Thank you. But yes, we're really excited to have Bill on today. Bill's a longtime friend of ours and also a skeptic. Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. So before we get into the episode today, we want to give a few announcements. And that includes, first off, this big piece of wood I am holding. This is a homemade Ouija board that JT made.
I want to call it a Ouija block.
It is kind of a Ouija block. So JT made this. He is basically going to be making homemade Ouija boards from now on. This was one of his first ones that he did. And actually, one of our ultra para junkies, Lorenzo, bought this Ouija board, but not for himself. He bought it so that we could raffle off this board to one of our para junkies. So the next episode that we do, we're going to have all the para junkies' names in one bowl, and we're going to pick out who's the lucky person who will be receiving this Ouija board, which is going to be really fun. So if you want this Ouija board, then you should definitely consider joining us over on Patreon, which is the best way to support us. And that is also how we're going to be funding Ghosts. And if you are not familiar with what Ghosts is, it's basically going to be our mobile podcast studio. We're going to get an RV, and we're going to travel to all those haunted locations that y'all want us to go see. And we will do actual podcast episodes while we are at the location. So if you want us to do that, definitely consider joining us as a para junkie. But
I just got to say, that's a good job. You made that. That's an excellent job.
Right?
Yeah, that really is, it's professional looking.
It is very professional.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. And then one other announcement. Chris has the Paranormal Museum opening soon.
These are facts. We are going to be opening the Savannah Paranormal Museum in mid-March, and we're looking forward to bringing you an opportunity to be face-to-face with a bunch of objects that are purportedly very, very haunted. We've definitely had some strange experiences with them, and as they come in, it gets heavier and heavier in the room that they hang out in.
It's like molasses
It
in there.
is. It really is.
It's like swimming through soup. It really is. So if you want to swim through soup,
Alphabet or vegetable?
both.
I think it's like more like chowder.
It is chowder.
Oh, chowder.
Chowder.
Oh, yeah, clam chowder. We're talking now.
No.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, if you want to swim through soup energetically, you know where to find us. It's going to be here in Savannah. It's really awesome. The artifacts that are coming in are just incredible. And we're actually going to be showing one of them in the Fix after we finish this episode. So that is another reason to become a para junkie, because we show them all the creepy things that we acquire. But anywho, today we are going to be doing a Ghostmail episode, but we figured it'd be fun to have Bill on as a skeptic to get his perspective of how he would interpret some of these stories. But before we get into the Ghostmail, I want to ask you, Bill, what's your relationship with the paranormal?
Well, two.
Yeah.
There's two.
Yeah.
One was a friend of mine who died a few years ago, and one was my father who died about 10 years ago. And these stories are, again, these were two guys that if they said it, you could put money on it. It happened. There was no bull. It happened. And I never heard any other stories from them except for these two that I will tell you. And they just said it happened to fact, and I saw it, and I have no doubt about it.
Right.
Would you like me to tell you one now?
Yes.
Yes.
Tell us all
I'll
the
start with the
stories.
one my friend told me. Now, my friend when I moved, before I always call it PMA, pre-Mary Ann. But when I moved to Marlborough, Massachusetts, it was a 4-building condo, and he lived across the street. He was like the first person I ran into there, and we just hung around. He was maybe, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years younger than me, but he said it was about a century younger.
Oh.
Anyhow, he was saying when he was a union carpenter up in Massachusetts, and sometimes they would send you, like they needed help down in Florida or Georgia or wherever, didn't have enough local help in the union, so they would go down there, and the best part about it was Boston union scale, which is higher than Florida or Georgia union scale. It all depends on, the part of the country you live in, and that obviously the bigger cities get the higher scale. So he would come down, and he bought a used trailer, I think it was a 24-footer, stayed at a campground because he also get paid by the day just to live there, and it was much less than paying for a hotel. So he could keep the difference. They paid you whatever the rate was, and he stayed at campgrounds. So he said that was just terrific, right? He'd work all day, go to the campground, have a couple of beers, sit there, and, whether he cooked his lunch or had his supper and had something to eat on the way home, I don't know. Anyhow, he's staying at this campground in Georgia. I wish I remembered the name of it. There's a lot of, my wife and I, Marianne, we camped in several campgrounds in Georgia. It is one of the best states for state parks. They are outstanding state. They're well maintained, they're well regulated, and they don't scalp you on the price. So anyway, whichever one it was, he said it was built. They had the park was built by slaves, and there was a rumor that there was a woman that walked through that park at night in a white flowing gown, and and again, so I mean, there was the slave thing there, and then there was this woman thing. And so he says, one night after work, I'm just sitting out at the table, and I look, and I'm thinking, he said, about 20 or 30 feet in front of me, I see a woman walking by barefoot in a flowing white dress. And I said, how many beers did you have? He says, I'm telling you, I just get out of work. I maybe had one beer, and I don't drink when I'm working. Maybe had one beer. He says, and it stunned me because she wasn't just doing it. There was something about her. There was a glow to her. There was a glow. And he says, I'm watching and watching and watching, and then she takes one more step and boom, vanishes. Wow. And he says, I don't care what you say about it. I saw it. It happened.
I believe it.
But anyway, the thing was, again, he wasn't one to tell stories like that. That's the only one he ever told. And this was a guy, you were in the service, he won 4 Bronze Stars in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So this guy.
No nonsense man.
No nonsense guy. And hey, I'll just tell you a quick story about that. And there's some guy, he says, some guy in Vietnam is very lucky to be alive. He was on one of those Swift boats.
Oh, sure.
Right? And John Kerry was on. And he says he gets out and they're going through the trails and that. And he turns the corner and there's a VC, Viet Cong, right in front of him with a gun. His gun jammed. And he picked up his gun and he said, drop it. He knew what he meant. He says, now get out of here because today's the luckiest day of your life.
Oh, no.
And he let him just go. He says, I couldn't do it. He was unarmed and I couldn't shoot him.
Of course not.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
And that's the story.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story.
Solid story.
Right.
And I want to say, just south of here, I know a story of a woman who walks around a flowing white gown just outside of Hinesville. There's a story of a woman that frequents a patch of open land in her big white flowing gown.
That's how I want to be perceived as a dead person.
Oh.
Just a lady in a very flowy gown, just ominously.
Me too.
Yeah.
I want to be a fainting goat.
We can make that happen.
Crash.
That's fantastic. But yes. So Bill, you said you had another story as well with your father.
You want to hear it now?
Oh yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
2 in a row. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
My father, again, was, my brothers and sisters said I took after him more than anyone, and I didn't want to take after him. I didn't dislike him. I loved him. He was a good man. Him and my mother taught us one thing. It was honesty. If you weren't honest, you had nothing. No matter how you accomplish in life, if people didn't trust you, you had nothing. So that was a great lesson. That's the kind of people they were. my father and mother. But my father, again, he would have that's hogwash, that's huswaddle, that's someone. I'd say, Dad, you know what happened? If he didn't see it, it didn't happen, kind of. If it was a little bit off the chart, it was, it just didn't happen. So anyway, he was, at this age, he's telling me the story, about 8 or 9 years old. He said, in the middle of the night, I get up, and there's a candle on my bureau, and that wouldn't, this was back when they didn't have electricity. My father was born in 1919, so they may not have had electricity in the house. And there was a candle upstairs in his bedroom. And he says, there was never a candle. They didn't leave one if they brought me to bed that the candle went out. And I went, when I went to sleep, there was no light in the room. And at that time, he had a 4 or 5 year old brother. And back in that day, a lot of kids didn't make it to adulthood. There was a lot of childhood diseases that, fortunately they got vaccinated for today and they don't have that problem.
Right.
But anyway, he had a sickly brother. And he said, and he sees the candle, as he's looking at the candle, again, maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, he's wondering, what is the candle doing there? And then all of a sudden it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer and went out. And at that moment, he says, I heard my mother crying. At that moment, his brother died.
Oh,
and he got up and went down the hall. When he came back in the bedroom, there was no candle on the bureau.
Wow.
And he's told that, again, as I'm sitting here, he told that this is what happened. I don't care what anyone says. And to hear it from a guy who would say, that's a crock if somebody told him something. That's all I'm saying. I leave it there.
That's a good one.
Yeah, his whole life he told that story about it, and it was, woo.
And it's interesting because there are a lot of people who only have that one story, but it's usually a doozy.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't believe in any of it, but there was this one time.
So you want to know my ghost story?
Absolutely. Yes. Are you kidding me?
You know what?
Why do you think we brought you here?
Oh, wait. Hold on. I think the spirits behind us might have something to say about that first, though, Bill.
Fire away.
They've arrived. We've been expecting them. Stories. Let us welcome our guest, if they dare stay. Make sure they're very comfortable. Are you comfortable? What stories are you going to tell us today?
Jingles arranged that for us. So.
Yes. So for people who are only listening, JT's been working overtime giving us special effects here. So if you watch the video, you get to see all of this wonderful light craft and oogity boogadiness.
Oogity boogities. Yeah.
That's true.
And
I think we should do the whole podcast in the red light. I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. But sorry, they wanted to show off for us. Yeah. So, Bill, go ahead and tell your story.
We want to hear your ghost story. Again, remember, anybody who's like, I don't believe, they have one good ghost story up their sleeve.
Well, I don't even know if this is good, but I'm just telling you, this is what happened. Just as I'm sitting here, it's what happened. Now, my wife and I moved to Savannah from the Boston area. Mm-hmm. You can't tell listening to me.
You're from Boston? What?
Boy, you could with Mary Ann. Even I. Ever said, what did you just say? She's got it down to
She does. Yeah. She has a true New England
It's in my
accent.
car. I told you it's in my car. Anyway.
It's very weird to hear Bill making fun of a New England accent.
On that point, really, someone said, my niece, right, she said, I was in the Army, and I was so tired of having people make fun of my accent. Finally, I said, listen, gather around. I got a story to tell you. The Pilgrims came to Massachusetts in 1620, taught us how to speak. You moved away and forgot. This is not an accent. This is fluent Pilgrim.
Nice.
So you folks,
keep that in mind. The Pilgrims love Duncans.
They did.
No, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? They'd have moved here just for that. Are you kidding? Dunkin' Donuts? Oh, Lord. I don't even know how. Well, again, I don't want to put a company down, but let's say some other big coffee company got started. They can't even come close to Dunkin' for taste.
Loyal.
There you go. A true New Englander through and through.
Yes.
So anyway, okay, so we bought a house in 2000, and then we had a close-up shop, as we call it, up home, right? we had to put my condo up for rent, and then move down here. So we just lived here till we bought it in February, I think, in 2000, and then in June we went back home, and we're coming back for July 1st to 2001 to make residence, official residence, and that. So we did, and the house we bought, we really loved it. It was just a good, a nice house. It was 2 streets away from where we live now. But while we were there 7 years, I had always said, I'd love to live in a brick house sometime. I don't know why. There's something about it. Maybe it's solid. Maybe, I don't know. It's going to be there after the hurricane.
That's very true.
So anyway, I'm with my friend, the one that told the ghost story about I'll call him Lee. That was his name. And so we're driving down the street, 2 streets away from where I lived at the time. Hey, Bill, look, there's a brick house for sale. I whoa, stop, we go, I knock on the door. No one was home. They had the real estate sign in the front. I said, let's just take a look in the back. So I go in the back, I go in the kitchen door, I knock on the door, nobody's home. And I looked around, and I'm looking around, and I said, okay, let's tell Mary Ann. I go home, Mary Ann, get your coat on. I found it. She says, what? I says, a brick house. She says, well, where is it? It's just 2 streets away. I said, you're going to love it. What's it look like? I said, are you kidding me? It has a 2-car garage. And it has the most beautiful backyard. It's a little overgrown now, but I don't mind cleaning it up. It is really spectacular. We could have soup and parties out there.
Yeah. Yes.
It's really great. But what's the house look like? I said, it had bricks. I don't know, but it had a 2-car garage. I could put my motorcycle in it.
A fabulous backyard.
And a big backyard.
So anyway, she came. We loved it. We bought it. Long story. So now we're in the house, and it wasn't too long that we were in it that I look at her, I said, is somebody upstairs? Because you hear footsteps. No, and they had to drop down. I said, you know what? I don't know. It's either a very heavy squirrel or somebody's walking around up there. So I dropped the ladder that you walk up into the attic, look around, I get up, I walk around, nothing up there, no one up there. So this happened several times. And so we just named it after one of our friends that had died. Hey, welcome, Eddie, blah, blah, blah. Glad to hear. And it was a friendly ghost because they never caused any trouble.
Fair enough.
But they'd like to make noise when we were just talking about something important or watching something good on TV or something. That's when they'd make their noise. So we know that they were having fun, and that's it. So that's my ghost story. And this went on for years, and I don't know, they got a better family to haunt, or they got lost. They took a wrong turn on the freeway, Batman.
You never know. You never know. Or, they may have just, they're timed out.
Yeah.
It's like, we're done. We're
done knocking around.
Clock out here.
You think they have an hourglass?
Probably.
It might be a
likely.
century glass or something.
Yeah.
We've talked about, how long a spirit can last, because they
Sure.
do over time. If people aren't consistently keeping their spirit alive by telling ghost stories, they
Like Perry Mason, you remember? Great Caesar's ghost.
great
I
season.
used to-
And
that was
Caesar's
his
still
saying.
running around.
But that was his saying.
Yeah,
and
it
I'm
was,
saying,
yeah.
that was a long time ago, man. Let go of it.
Okay,
Caesar.
update it.
Exactly.
You don't even speak English. You
Great
didn't-
Lincoln's ghost.
I don't think he conquered England, did he?
You didn't get that far.
No, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Well, technically, I suppose. I mean, the Roman Empire was pretty
I guess.
expansive.
But still.
Yeah, but I don't think he ever made it.
I don't think that was him. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great story, though. And I mean, it sounds like the classic haunted
Sure.
house ghost. Nothing crazy, nothing that's going to cause you problems. But
But if it was enough to notice to the point at which you're nicknaming the sound, that's the
We
kind of
both
thing
would
that-
notice it.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
Right.
and sometimes I wouldn't say anything, and she'd say, "Did you hear that?" And I didn't want to, say, "Oh, sometimes someone says something. Oh, yeah, a car went by." Or
Right,
something.
yeah, right, exactly.
But I wouldn't say anything, and she said, "Did you hear them?" There, okay, it's not just me.
well, there you go.
I said, Madison loved this, but I hadn't met you yet.
One day I'll meet someone named Madison. and
She's going to love
she's
this
gonna love
story.
this
Say,
story. It's a great
wow.
story.
Well, actually, that's a great segue into this first ghost mail, too, because it's also about a haunted house.
There you
So
go.
I think we should dive into our ghost mail. But JT, do our spirits have anything to say to us for ghost mail, or are they...
Next ghost mail, I worked real hard on the first.
Okay,
You've got ghost mail.
there you go. Jingles work too hard on that one, so that works perfect. But all right, so this first story comes from Brad, and the email was titled Spook Central, aka my childhood home. And so, hello again. I just listened to y'all read my last ghost mail about my friend Eric and was so excited. He pronounced it as Eric, but he said you can call him anything as long as you don't call him late for supper. He likes dad jokes.
But
So do I.
And I never got that reference.
Yeah.
It's a great joke.
It's a great
is.
joke. You don't have to classify them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Also, we are relatively close to y'all, Morgan County, about 60 miles east of Atlanta. So, hello. Welcome.
Ew.
But on to the meat and taters. But they said that, not me.
Oh, I was like, whoa, Madison, your southern showing.
Say that is Morgan County.
Yeah, that is Morgan County.
He proved it.
The house that I grew up in isn't very old. My parents had it built in 1979, but the land, however, has a rich history. Like a lot of rural Georgia, it was a plantation land. The original manor house is actually within sight of my parents' house. It has its own spirits that I can go into later if y'all are interested. Absolutely. Always tell us about the creepy house that you watch at night. As a kid, we frequently heard footsteps in the hallway.
Footsteps? You don't say.
You don't say. Maybe it was Bill's ghost. It's
It's not that far.
yeah. It's conceivable. It's
I call it Mary Ann's ghost.
Mary
Mary
Ann's
Ann's
ghost. That's
ghost.
fair. That's fair. No, you lay no claims. That's fair.
but it has hardwood floors, and as a new build, some settling is expected. But these were rhythmic steps. I always assumed it was my parents heading to the bathroom or kitchen or something. It wasn't until after I moved out and we were talking about old times that I found out that my parents assumed it was one of us kids. So looking back, that was the earliest thing I remember. Sometimes we slept with the bathroom light on. I think this started after my younger brother was born. Well, one night, my younger sister spent the night at our cousin's house, who lived about 5 miles away. Sometime after midnight, I had gotten up for something. I forgot what, but I had just got back into bed when I heard something at the door. I turned to look, and there was the silhouette of a young girl around my sister's age standing in the doorway. It's the last thing you want to see in the middle of the night.
We'll go ahead and say that little girls are creepy.
They are little creepy things.
They're just creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even talking just ghosts. I mean, just little girls. Creepy.
Little girls in general.
Straight up creepy.
That's a fair assessment. I thought it was my sister and said something like,
She's talented.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm just saying.
just so you know.
Just so you know. Okay. Easily creeped out.
But I thought it was my sister and said something like, "What are you doing home?" And she just turned and headed towards the front of the house where my sister's room was. I got up, followed, really confused. By the time I got out of my room, of course, no one was there. I went to her room and looked in, but it was empty. I checked the living room, bathroom, everywhere, and didn't find anything. I even looked outside. My sister was still at my cousin's. I figured everyone would think I was crazy, so I just went back to bed and made sure I have away from the door. Fast forward about 20 years, I was talking to my dad about all the weird things we'd seen in the house, and he told me that a few nights before he'd had heartburn and couldn't sleep. It was a full moon night, and their window faces a field and trees. That's never a good sign when they mention that. So he was just looking at the night when he said this young black girl in a plain dress and braided hair slowly walked up to the window, looked in at him, then turned and walked away. This window is about 6 feet above the ground, by the way. He decided it was time to go watch TV after that. And one more, on a more lighthearted note, my cousin Joe is a hardcore skeptic. We were telling him about the resident ghosts, and he wasn't believing a word. He said, "Y'all are crazy. There are no ghosts here, and nothing will make me believe different." As soon as he says that, a ball of paper came from behind him and hit him behind the ear hard. The chair he was sitting in has a brick wall behind it. He jumped up, looked around, and almost ran out the door. This was about 8 years ago, and to this day, he will not set foot in the house. I have so many more stories that I'm willing to share. Just say the word. Y'all take care. And
Word.
yes, and I'm assuming this was right before the Christmas season, and said, and have a very happy holidays, and to
Excellent.
which we did.
Wonderful.
I'm thinking the Red Sox could use a brick wall. It'd be cheaper than buying a pitcher.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
there
And if
you
it
go.
could throw something that hard, just, bring the brick wall out in their half of the inning, then put it back in the dugout.
There you
But
go.
turn it around so it can't throw things on the field and you get fined.
That sounds perfectly reasonable.
And it would be able to cover,
Exactly.
So the ground balls that went by, they just bounce right back out to the
Low
catcher.
away
Yeah,
ball
exactly.
to brick.
I mean, in my perspective, I feel like this is just like a house that has a lot of residual energy of sorts.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I would like to point out, because Bill wouldn't know this, but whenever we do ghost mails, they oftentimes feature very similar things. So like the first story will have features in the second story. So it's very interesting that you told a story about footsteps and hearing these footsteps
In a brick
and
house.
then in a brick house. And because it sounds like, that's going to be every letter, but it's actually really weird because sometimes it's like somebody will write a story about like having a dream about the distant past. And then the next letter will be about having a dream about, another time period.
Right.
And you're like, we don't call these. We're not picking them. This is how they arrive to us. So, and we weren't even going to read these today, by the way.
Yeah,
There
it's true.
was a point at which we were going to subject Bill to scary objects, but we thought that
This would
reading
be-
the ghost mails would be better. So
This would be kinder.
Yeah.
It's-
so it's not a gimmick that we're pulling here. It's like,
But I
oh,
did
Bill's story
learn
has
something.
walking.
I did learn something. When I go home, I am going to teach the wall on the behind the house to pitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
This could be a big
The-
thing.
it could be.
A moneymaker.
It really
All right, you
could.
don't have to give it $26 million a year. I'll take a third of that.
Exactly.
Look at
Absolutely.
that. It hasn't thrown a ball yet, just strikes.
It just strikes. So, Bill, as a skeptic, what would you take of all of this?
Well, again, you guys call me a skeptic. I call myself a realist.
Fair enough.
So, all I'm saying is I don't disbelieve them. Anyone can disbelieve the stories I told. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But if it happened to someone and they believe it and you trust them and they told you that, it happened. That's the way I look at it. But I just don't think all the things are abnormal. I don't think they're supernatural. I think some, it might have been the wind. It might have been something, a squirrel jumping from the tree to the roof. It could, I'm just saying.
The largest squirrel
not
known to
all-
man.
Yes. Big. They get big feet. You ever see them?
Big clown foot squirrels out there.
We don't have Bigfoot in Georgia. We have big peated squirrels. That's what we have. That's our cryptid.
That's fair enough. And it's a very healthy stance to negate for yourself anything that is outside your purview. If you haven't seen
Right.
it, there's no reason to invest in it. There's no reason to spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Right,
And,
but again,
and you
I
can't
just-
tell
I just
another
wanna-
person what they saw.
At
and
this time, I would never doubt
Right,
them. I would
exactly.
never say, you're full of baloney, as my
Right.
father would have. And then he told
And then
his
he tells you the candle
and then he
story.
yes. It's
You're
just,
like, listen, baloney man.
Yes.
but I'm thinking if someone like that never told any other story, you got to zone in on that one. As you said, sometimes the skeptics have the best stories.
Absolutely.
They
Well,
do.
and that's
Yeah.
just it, because usually a skeptic will be able to reason out anything, but if they have that one story they couldn't reason out, it stands out. And because it's their only story, you realize that they truly believe it. That they're
Yes.
that they're
Yes.
not trying to pull your leg. It has nothing to do with clout. It's the fact that they were unable to navigate around the occurrence.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I think, Brad, all of these are fun stories. And I think, you grew up in a little haunted house, which is very
There
cool.
you go.
Which I think is very Georgian.
I'd be
of
really
you.
interested to hear more about it, if you have stories about that house in particular, because it does sound very. There's something familiar about the setup,
Right.
I have this kind of like notion that if you kept telling us the story, we would hear more and more familiar tones to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would be horrified if I was your dad seeing a child walk up to my window 6 feet above the ground. But again. That could be something very residual in the way of the ground could have been higher at some point. Topography changes, and
the spirit's desire to look through the window is greater than its desire to obey the laws of gravity.
which is fair. I mean, if you can do it, why obey gravity?
But can it look through the brick? Why would it have to look through a window?
So that's a
Great
great question,
question.
and we've talked about this before.
It should be able to see through.
There are ghosts
Sure.
that don't
Yeah.
know that they can. If it were, they follow the rules.
They do now.
Yeah.
We
Well,
just told them.
That's true. So the classic one is at Fort Jackson, people oftentimes see a regiment of soldiers, but for some reason they all are amputees. They all are cut off at the knees. And what happened was, since the time that those soldiers would have been there, they actually built the land up. So they're walking on the land that they originally walked on. So they're not thinking, oh, I can walk through this wall. They're thinking this wall isn't here. And
Right.
so if the wall was there when they were alive, they usually observe it. They're usually like, oh, I'm not going to walk through this wall because it was here. And of course, that's all pure conjecture. It's
Right.
It's not like anyone's ever sat down and said, tell me, ghost, why do you walk through this wall but not through that wall? How do you stand outside the doorstep and not, come through?
They're like, this one's softer.
Right.
It hurts less to go through.
These bricks are nice. Those bricks are not.
But
They give it the Homer system.
very
These bricks were made with hard water.
But Brad, thank you so much for sending in your story. And yes, if you have any more, please do send them in. And our next story comes from Angela, and the email was titled Victorian Bride,
Ooh.
which I love a Victorian bride. That sounds
Indeed.
delightful. All right. Hi, y'all. I'm a new listener to the podcast and love all things Savannah. You should come visit us, unless you already live here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I found the
Victorian brides are
very Savannah.
Yeah, very Savannah.
I found the podcast on TikTok, and the first episode I watched was about the 12 Tribes cult. I'm so glad that you're enjoying that because I'm pretty sure they have a bounty on JT and I's heads. No, so side note, just total side note about that. JT and I, last week, I think, we got this heart-shaped box that was from like a donut company that we did not order.
Heart-shaped donuts.
Yeah. And we were...
Duncan.
Dunkin'.
No, they were not Dunkin', and they were not as good as Dunkin'. But we get it in the mail, and we're like, who sent us these? Because there was no return receipt or like anything like that or card. And so JT was like, what if the cult sent us these donuts to poison us? So he's like, I'm going to eat one first.
But
Don't eat
That
one.
is not how you test for poison. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, you do not
but you
test
said
poison
first.
by eating.
You didn't say let's both try it when you said
Yeah.
first, so that was a test.
Yeah. Well, and JT was like, if I croak, at least you didn't, And then we found out that it was actually, we used to use Fair Harbor for our ticketing platform. And
right.
it was Fair Harbor's competitors sending us donuts for us to switch over.
Okay, let me tell you, that's an excellent campaign.
Right?
If you send me baked goods, I'm very likely going to follow you to the end of the world. So
Yeah. But
that's good to know.
And to answer your question, Milea, did y'all eat them? Yeah, after JT didn't die within 5 minutes, we did eat them. So
Okay,
Nice to know how loved you are.
real talk, listeners. Don't eat food that you don't know where it comes from. If
was
someone
wrapped
just
up.
offers you food, people can wrap up horrible things. So please, please don't eat food that you don't know where it comes from.
unless they're donuts.
Unless they're donuts.
But anyways, so yeah, the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes.
The 12 tribes. Oh my Lord.
The 12 tribes cult did not try to kill us, but Angela said I have been hooked ever since. So
Oh, back to Angela.
yes. So now on to the reason for this email. When I was 13 to 14 years old, I had a dream of a beautiful Victorian mansion that was hosting a wedding inside. In my dream, I, along with all the other guests, were standing in a grand ballroom waiting for the bride to descend down a staircase into the ballroom. The bride was a young woman with long blonde hair and fair skin, and her features were slightly blurry. She wore a long white dress with a long train trimmed in lace. Her veil was long and wasn't covering her face. As she started to descend the stairs, the guests turned into an angry mob of people.
Oh, Lord.
They were all throwing mirrors to the floor and shattering them. That seems excessive. Then picking up the broken pieces of glass and throwing them at her. The large pieces of glass were slicing her and turning her beautiful white dress red. She looked at me with much clearer features and was begging for me to help her. I stood frozen in fear of what I was seeing, unable to help. Then I woke up and she was standing at the foot of my bed asking, "Why didn't you help me?"
Oof.
That's nightmare fuel, literally. I then ran to my parents' room, feeling her very much behind me. Once I got to their room, I started having a seizure. I have always been so curious as to what this dream could mean and who or what she is. I've never seen her again, but have had other encounters. Thank you all for reading this long email. Keep up the amazing job with this podcast. Fear not, Angela. This was not long. You can always give us all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's interesting because there are stories of it's, and we every now and then we will slip back and forth and we'll talk about these things, but there is something very fey about this story. There's something that in old folklore, what you have is the classic test. You're set up for a test that you're going to fail by a supernatural entity that then punishes you for your failure. It's interesting because the way these stories are constructed is to make you wary of strangers and make you wary of being tricked or trapped or things like that. But there is something strangely familiar. Like while the story was going on, I was trying to catalog like bride ghosts and women in white ghosts, which is a classic tale as well, and we've talked
also
about
a theme now.
And a theme that we've come across is the woman in white, and the woman in white usually is a harbinger of something coming, like an accident or something in your life, something that's going to upheave your life. Oftentimes just nervous. So for the first part of it, I was like, oh, it's a dream, and dreams, not to say they're not supernatural, but sometimes they are very much connected to your state of being, to what your life's like. But to have you wake up, see the entity, which again could still be you dreaming, but it actually fits into another story, which is the some people would call them demons. It's more fae than demon, really, fairy than demon, but it's setting you up to fail. Any entity that sets you up to fail so that they can take vengeance on your failure or punish you for your failure. That's interesting. I mean, there's enough folklore and enough ghost stories that kind of revolve around this, and that makes the concept. You were dealing with a non-human entity. This was not a ghost. This was not somebody who was a Victorian bride at one time. They presented themselves as a Victorian ghost. And that's from the point of view of storytellers and story collectors. Like when you're talking about it and you're like, I wonder what that is. It's like, well, here are the stories that hearken to your dream. This is the story that, that is not unlike, I almost want to say that you get into like Cuckoo Lane area where you've got mortals being tested, but they're unfair tests.
Right.
Like how could you possibly know that this was something you had to act upon or you're supposed to do this thing? They're kind of tricking you into like eating the apple off the tree kind of situation. So I'm intrigued, and I would love to hear more about the other experiences you've had and if they fall into the same kind of category of being misled by what you're being presented.
May I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you mentioned dreams. For years, from the time I was an adult, I wasn't a kid, an adult, I'm dreaming I'm in a small airplane, like a Piper or something, just a small propeller airplane, and I am ready to take off. I'm getting in it. I'm heading down the runway, and just before I take off, I'd wake up, or the dream would end. I didn't wake up, and that was it. And it was always at Hanscom in Bedford, Mass. I was always at Hanscom. I was in this small plane and going to take off, and it was so nice. It never took off, though. I was just, you wake up and you're saying, great dream, same dream. You don't go to bed thinking anything different than you did, all week. And this went on for years. I kid you not, 20 years maybe.
Oh, wow.
So now, Mary Ann and I are out in Arizona, and she had a friend there that owned a small plane. So it's a brand was called a Mooney. I had never heard of it. Did you ever hear of Mooney?
I've heard Mooney as a term, yeah.
It's a small airplane.
Right.
In fact, when you get on, you have to step real close to the body of the plane,
Right.
the cockpit, before, on the wing, you don't want to step out too far, you could damage it. So,
Right.
Being a kind of big guy, I paid attention to that. So Mary Ann got in back, and I got in front. Now, this guy was also an instructor, so it had one of those half wheels on each side.
Right.
Right?
So,
it's
yeah.
it.
Right.
So anyway, we take off, and we're flying from Phoenix out to another airport to go for lunch. So and anyway, we stand, we go, we everything's good. It takes off fine. It lands fine. We go to lunch and that. We're coming back. Now we're coming back, and it's just not. I don't like big planes. I really don't. They're too uncomfortable. This one, even though there's not a ton of room, I felt like,
Because you weren't in anybody else's business, right?
Right.
So anyway, we're coming back, and I just turned. Mary Ann was behind, and she had the camera. And back then, you had a camera.
Right. Yes, that's right.
I'll explain that in another show.
Those you don't know, you used to carry a different device.
Yes, you didn't call people on this. This was a camera. So anyway, I just put my hand. I didn't touch the wheel because I knew he was driving. I said, "Hey, Mary Ann, look, I'm flying." He said, "Go ahead, you got it." Now I have it. He said, "Okay, bank right." And I'm telling you, not a lot of things scare me. This plane is in my control now, and I slowly banked right, and okay, straighten it up. He said, none of my students do as smoothly as you did. I said, I was too scared to do that. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Anyway, so when he took it back, from that time on, and that was about 1994, I've never had that dream again of wanting to fly.
It's
like
so
conquered. It was conquered, so I flew.
That's a past life dream. Mm-hmm. And not to say that that's, definitively, but the stories that we hear, likely you were in a past life died in a plane wreck. And until you took control of the plane and landed safely, you would have to relive. I had a friend who, I guess it would have been before you were in Savannah, but I had a friend who was a theater person here who used to have this recurring nightmare about being stuck in the fuselage of a jet underwater, and the last thing he sees is a shark coming at him.
God.
And this was a ongoing nightmare that he had for years. And then he went to the Outer Banks in North Carolina with his it was like a family reunion, and they're like, your great uncle, World War II, crashed his plane right out there, and they never found his body.
Oh.
And from that point on, he never had the dream again. After they
did
told
he ever
him,
hear that story though? Because it was a
it's
relative.
very possible. It's a relative, although it didn't seem like, because this was the first time he was with that side of the family, and he was not close with that side of the family. But it's very possible that he had heard it and it just bedded in him. But he was afraid of Jaws. He thought that he was afraid of sharks. But after that, he kind of realized that it wasn't the shark.
It was feeding them that he was afraid of.
Feeding the sharks.
Being the meal.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the panic of being in the fuselage and being alive.
Right.
For any period of time before,
Well, that would be horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's insane, Bill. That's
a really wild story, especially the length of time that you had that dream.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I got another one, and it starts at a much earlier age, and it went on for a long time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Skeptic, Bill Cooper.
You'll have to invite me back now to hear this one.
Yeah.
No.
That's the teaser.
Oh, it's a teaser. We'll have Bill back.
Yes.
Unless you'd rather hear it now.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. We're always down to hear
Okay,
yours.
here it is.
Go forward.
I have an excellent memory. I said to someone sometime, an excellent backwards memory. And she says, all memories backwards. And then I realized she was right.
That is fair.
I actually remember being 2 years old in my playpen. They were wood then. They weren't this cloth or fabric or things you can see through. They were wooden slats. And I'm 2 years old, because I knew how old my brother was. He wasn't born yet. And my sister, my only pal was my sister, because my mother was always in the kitchen cooking and putting meals up for, So there was just me and my sister. My father was at work a minute. So she would come in, and I would pull her hair. and would not let go. My mother had to peel my hand off her pigtail, right? And then she wouldn't come in anymore. And I'm saying, not good. Now, this isn't a dream. That's what really happened. The other part that really happened was, I remember I still had a bottle, but they were glass bottles back then. They weren't plastic. With the nipple on it, glass bottle, and there was usually, it wasn't milk, it was water or orange juice, because I remember standing up drinking it. So I was maybe just a little over 2 years old. And then we had the big 5-gallon water jug, which also was glass, because, they didn't have plastic to the degree they have it today.
Right.
And as soon as I threw, and there was not a drop left, I would fire that thing at the glass thing. And my mother would come in and stop that. You're going to break it. I didn't even know what that meant. All I knew was made such a joyous sound that clink.
Yeah.
That was nice, like Colonel Clink.
Oh, God.
So I just throw it no matter how many times she told me. I never broke it because they were pretty strong.
They were big, those are thick bottles. Yeah.
That and the baby bottle was strong too. So anyway, here's the dream. And I remember this, at probably 3 years old was the first time I remember having it. I have an ice cream cone. Now, who doesn't like ice cream? I have an ice cream cone, and it's filled up, jammed on, and it's overhanging it, and you're looking at it. They used to have, Howard Johnson's used to sell ice cream, and they had a special cone. It wasn't round on top. It was kind of cone shape. Oh, sure. So it was different, but they had it loaded on the side. It's like, and I would be dreaming I would have this ice cream cone. I'm looking at it, I'm smiling, and I always woke up before I tasted it. Oh. And it made me unhappy. When I woke up, I didn't have any ice cream.
Right.
It was like my first bout of depression. This isn't nice. I kid you not, this dream went on for years. The same dream, 2 years old, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it would be maybe 8 or 10 times a year. It was a very recurring dream. And I would force myself to go back to sleep to see if I could dream it again, to take a bite, at least take a taste. Never did. So that's my story.
Oh, wow.
I'm sticking with it, kids.
Again, it's fascinating. Recurring dreams oftentimes are kind of like this, like a splinter in the mind.
Right.
It's something that you're mulling over. You're trying to dislodge in your subconscious some jewel.
Am I going to be billed for this therapy?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Why do you think we invited you here?
But JT is letting us know we need to wrap it up. But thank you so much, Bill. We'll bring you back on.
Oh, God,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It was a
True
good
joy.
time. I knew
Absolutely.
it would be. Good people, good time.
Yeah. And for those of y'all who are watching right now on the live stream, the Parajunkies, stick around because we are going to be doing a fix after this. But again, thank y'all again for watching today's episode. I hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your day whenever you're listening to this. And my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And I'm Bill Cooper.
And stay spooky, y'all.